Two, one. We're live here on Thursday night, and we have this young lady with us. Karen, everybody to me at my age is young, okay? Um, and of course,
That's
Catherine.
fine.
Catherine is here, and this, and everybody that knows anything about me knows I've been on this mission for a long time. That book up in the corner, which way? This way. um, Exposing the churches. And this young lady is the daughter of a friend of ours who actually helps us do weddings and officiate some weddings for us. And she has come forth to want to share her story, hopefully to warn, I guess, other young teens that go to church about the dangers that exist in these houses of worship. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. So, Karen, um, you started out not in the most recent church, but your first experience. And I'll just
Yes.
interject real quick. Her case, she was protected, if you will. In other words, she was groomed, but from what I understand, she's going to share her stories. And so what we're focused on now is the act of grooming and what takes place in these places of that they have worship, they say. So, Karen, I'm just going to let you tell your story, going back, if you would, start with the earlier story of when you were like 16.
Okay. So I was going to this church, and the youth minister would take me home from church sometimes because my parents couldn't always because of work. Well, one night the youth minister couldn't, so the assistant youth minister did, and like, no big deal, okay, whatever. But then he started like sitting next to me at church and all kind of stuff, and just getting closer. And so I was like, okay, nobody had ever really paid me attention like that before. And so eventually it was, do you want to be my girlfriend? I'm like, okay, sure. But it was weird the way it was asked. So I started asking questions, and um, God told him I was his future wife. I was 15, almost 16 when we started dating. And he was 19. He was the assistant youth pastor, actually. So, um, and then like he came to my house, he met my parents, like he was there for like New Year's and did fireworks, all kinds of things. And then like eventually at some point, I don't know if he felt bad or what happened, but he was the one who was like, hey, no, I'm too old for you. And if you decide to quit going to church and then you burn in hell, it'll all be my fault.
Okay. Uh, Catherine, you are close, or you know Karen. Am I pronouncing it right? I think
You
Catherine
are.
corrected me. um, I'm going to let you talk to her, uh, shall I say female to female, and talk about her story and the grooming aspects and warn other people about what takes place. These people are, parents really push church. And so kind of lead the way with her if you don't mind. I'm going to step back and let you do that. And can you do that?
I can do that.
Okay. And I'll be in the background listening.
Okay, Karen, as you're me being a parent and having a child that went to church and was also possibly in the same situation that you're in, that you were put in, not at that level, but with a peer a few years older. And when I say a few years, the mental thing, they were about on the same level. Actually, I think Elizabeth might have gone above, but when this person realized, do you think that they felt guilty about this?
Not really. I kind of feel like the way that it was done was more like a cover your own self kind of thing. Like, I need to tell her this before I have problems. That's the way it came across to me, analyzing it now as an adult.
Okay. And at what point, at what age did you figure out as an adult that that was grooming, or did you figure it out at that time?
Oh no, as an adult, like very recently, like within the last year or two. I just started unpacking all of this stuff and like talking to people with similar things that had happened. And they're like, hey, yeah, no, this is what happened to you. And I was like, oh, because I never thought about it like that before. I always thought about it in just it was a normal kind of thing. It was a little but then I was like, no, like that was not okay.
I'll be honest with you, earlier, as you were telling one of your stories when we were on the phone, you actually triggered some things that I remember happening to me that I did not even think about as being grooming. And I think
I
that,
mean, it's such small things sometimes that you just don't realize. It seems so normal.
yes, because they don't just go, hey, you're going to do it this way. This is what's going to happen. They don't do that. It's little bitty steps, it's little bitty gifts, it's special attention, it's
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of people, a lot of these groomers look for children that are maybe have a lower self confidence. Um,
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that because they make you feel really special. And if you're somebody who's never really felt special before, it really means something.
they're usually looking for the kid that's kind of, and I hate to say this, but they're looking for the kid that's, you know, usually the black sheep, uh, the problem child, um, the one whose parents are not 100% in their life. Um, that's who they're looking for. They're looking for somebody they can victimize, and that person not even feel like they're a victim. And Dr. Graham actually said something that he disagreed with. He's saying that can you come on, Dr. Graham, if you want to, and say why you would disagree with that?
Well, I've been dealing with this subject for longer than some people have been alive, and it doesn't target based on their family. It doesn't target from what I've seen. I'm not saying it can't happen that way. And clearly, the more worldly educated a child is, the less they can get by with it. They look for innocence, and they do look for kids that, and adults too. They will groom women, and it's not just children, but the children are the more innocent ones that need protection. Um, but they will pick, that they find attraction to somebody. If the first thing they want to do, and I think Karen would agree with this in her experience, is they seek for moments to isolate you, to get alone with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, they'll start out very subtly. Um, and I think Catherine's words were kind of strong, troubled child. They might have troubles. All teens going through puberty, that stage of their life, as they go into the early teens and whatnot. There's a lot of things going on that unfortunately parents don't educate their children to what's happening, with their bodies and what to expect and the different feelings they have. And so along comes another adult, and believe me, to a 16-year-old, even a 21-year-old is an adult, right? you know, in your eyes, oh, here's a mature person. They've got a car. They're got this position in the church. So it don't necessarily mean it's a dysfunctional family. That's not the it always. But at that stage in life, it's easy to find somebody. And then a lot of times, a young girl or even a young guy will look at a guy in their early 20s and older, and you're kind of you're taught, you're already groomed by your parents in a sense of holding a respect to these people. You're trained that way. This is an adult. They got a position. They're a person of authority. They're knowledgeable, and those kind of things. So you already start out the story that Karen is going to share further here when I quit blabbing. You don't question that authority. You roll with it because it's just what you do. I mean, I'm going to church to be trained to be closer to God, and these people are godly men because they work for the church and all that sort of stuff. That's the feeling you get. You walk into that church environment, it's like, this is God's house, and these are God's people. So you don't question a whole lot. And then you've got these sensations running through your body. You're just going through puberty, and all these sensations are taking place that you're not expecting. You don't know how to deal with it. And then you're kind of confused at that stage in life. And then here comes along this person of authority, and they wrap their arm around you and say, let me counsel with you. Let me be your friend. Well, in your situation, it was more than just being a friend, wasn't it? It has opened up on a new level. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's been my experience with these cases. There's not been one. The only thing in common is the grooming aspect of it. The people they target is not necessarily fitting the same mold all the way through. It's young, it's innocent. Sometimes you'll find an adult woman that falls prey to this. So it's not just kids, but the majority of times, and of course, what we're focused on is all these innocent children that don't know a thing about life. They know school and they know a ball game and PE, and they just don't know life. And so they don't know what to expect. And they're thrown into this environment, maybe the first time in their lives outside of school, that they're around other adults in their lives. Um, an interesting footnote with all that is that churches and public schools are the two major places that these incidents take place. Church is only second to public schools in this regard. So anyway, Catherine, there's my response. But yeah, ask her questions to help her get through her stories, because I tell you what you shared with us about what happened at the other church of Highlands, it blew my mind. The prophet, and that one just, I'm sorry, tell your story.
Karen, actually, I am curious about that prophet thing. Can you tell me what the in the church, like what the levels were that you knew of?
The what?
The levels in the church,
she's,
like
she's
that you had the
she's talking
prophets.
she's talking about the rankings. You got prophets, you've got pastors, you got bishops. What are the rankings of these people in church?
Oh, so like the members of the staff were the staff. And it didn't matter if they were a pastor, an administrator, anything like that. They were all still pastor so and so if they were on staff. The janitors were still pastors, deacons still pastors. They were all called pastors. Well, then you had your ministers. So you had people who did like children's ministry and youth ministry. And so they were on staff, but they weren't technically called staff. They were called something else. And so those were the ministers. Then you, of course, had your other people who didn't really have a title. they just were kind of on the worship team. You had your what they called the dream team, and that's everyone who serves in any capacity in the church and does not get paid for it. So you build a house for somebody, you don't get paid. Anything like that on a serve project that they have told you God wants you to do. There were prophets, there were people who would come to you and pray over you, and then you get your prayer language. Like, that was their only thing they did. They'd come up to you, put a hand on you, pray for you in tongues, and then apparently you could pray in tongues. Literally, like, everything had a place, and they even had a test for you to take to tell you what your spiritual gifts were. And that was the only area of the church they wanted you to serve in, because that's what God said you should do. But a test can't tell you what I am good at and what God made me good at. That's weird.
I agree with you. Can you are you ready to tell your story about what happened to you at this church?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I started going with a friend of mine that I had met at work. She was older than me by a few years, and she went to this church, and she was a member of the like ministry intern program. It was actually like church college, essentially, for like college age kids. And so I started going with her, hanging out with her and everything, hanging out with them. She got me involved in a small group that she helped teach, and it was called Pink. It was about 10 to 12 of us that met every Sunday morning as like a Sunday school type thing. And it was led by a couple, and it was quite literally the instructions on how to be like a godly, submissive, like perfect wife. And it really came across like your worth and your value was in what a man thinks of you. And they did put a big emphasis on the man God gives you, the person God has for you. So they wanted you to know that God had someone for you. Started hanging around with the intern people a lot more. And there was this guy that used to be one, but he was a church member and he hung around a lot. And there was lots of prophets in the church. But for some reason, this prophet decided that this man was my future husband, that God told the prophet was for me. I was 17 and he was 25. He had actually recently graduated from college for his master's degree. Like, he was a youth intern. He would lead service sometimes and everything. And like, we just started hanging out, and he told me he was going to start taking me home from church and picking me up for church. So it started out that way. Then we just kind of started hanging out more, and we would go out with other people. And eventually it ended up becoming like I was like, so I thought in love with this man. Like, I just knew I was going to spend the rest of my life with him because that's what God had said. I did question my parents at one point and ask them, like, hey, if God has a plan for your life, will he tell somebody else? And my mom was like, well, sometimes God uses other people to tell you his plans for you. He doesn't always tell you. So I was like, oh, okay. And nothing really bad ever happened. He put his hand on my knee a few times, but we had a lot of alone time together. There was only one time where I actually kind of had a feeling that something was weird or off, and it was his birthday. And some of my friends from the church, one of the ladies that led the small group, actually, another youth intern, they all picked me up, actually, and I was his surprise for his birthday. He didn't know I was coming. And they blindfolded him, put him in the car. We got to where we were going. They took it off, and he was like super excited to see me. And I was like, this is really weird. Like, this is an odd thing for, like, I'm a teenager and he's an adult. It's kind of weird for me to be like like, that's weird to me. But everything else I thought was just God's plan, and I didn't really question it because it wasn't something that I thought needed to be questioned, because these were church people. and I thought I could trust church people. They questioned my faith in God a lot and stuff. It made me question lots of other things. So I would question if like I was wrong, maybe. And so it got to a point where like a female staff member, a church children's minister, had actually found out. And she came out and she told me, hey, yeah, I'm taking you home from church tonight. He's never picking you up again. You're never going to be alone with him again. And I need you to come talk to me in the office. And I was like, am I in trouble? And she's like, no, you're not in trouble. Come talk to me in the office. And I literally still was not understanding, even with them asking me questions like, did he kiss you? Where did he take you? What did you do together? How long have you been seeing each other? How long was this going? Like all these questions, that I was like, what did I do? I just knew I did something, but they were trying to figure out what had actually happened. They were trying to figure out if he had like violated me. And I had not realized that at the time.
It's interesting just to interject a thought here, because the reason we're doing this is to help educate other people, the kids that may come across this information, as well as the parents. If you listen to her story, and the mindset of a child immediately is, what did I do wrong? See, and this is why now she's in her young 30s and just now feels compelled to come out with his story, because you go through life and you think that you're responsible, you did something wrong. That's part really of the whole grooming process. And unfortunately, in the Christian church, they set that stage with everybody pretty young, because immediately in church, what do they tell you? You're a sinner, you're a wretch, somebody had to die for you. You see, so you already got this heavy burden on you that, and then if you actually read those Bible stories, some of those are pretty pretty vicious. But the bottom line is these innocent children are already going through life thinking that, hey, if somebody had, I'm a sinner, I'm a bad person, somebody had to die for me. And then you get groomed like she's talking about. And so, a lot of these cases don't come to light until much later, because you're carrying this guilt that somehow you brought it on. I remember when I was young, believe it or not, I was young at one time. In church, they would never warn the guys, but they would, in church service, admonish the girls about short dresses. In other words, the poor guy cannot control his penis. It's always the girl's fault. So imagine what pressure that puts on the girl. She can't dress what she's comfortable with and actually be herself. Every time she looks in her closet, she's got to think, is the guy, what's that going to do to the guy? I don't know how that is today, but that's the way it was when I was young. So it's always the guy's fault. The girl, if the girl got raped.
No, that's still how it is. That's really still how it is. It doesn't matter what you do. You've done something wrong, and no matter what he did to you, it's all your fault.
That's it. I've seen cases where, my cousin that I brought up earlier, they didn't do anything to the guy. They kind of, in the church, kind of slapped him on the wrist. You know what I'm saying? But they made her feel like crap. I mean, really feel like crap. And so it's called victim blaming, bottom line. So yeah, it's vicious. And it, like I said, what angers me, and it really got me in 2016 when the presidential thing was going on, and they're talking about boycotting Target because of a bathroom usage thing. I thought, boycotting Target, look what's going on in the church. Why aren't they talking about that? You attach the word Christian to it or attach God to it, and they just their mind seems to just go dead. So anyway, thanks for letting me interject that. I'm sorry. But that's it. The whole grooming experience and the poor innocent children, they don't know how to deal with it. Just going on with the program.
And I will say, I quit going to that church 3 weeks later because when I went, no one talked to me.
So the
Like
room
one person
revealed,
talked to me, and I really felt like I had done something wrong.
you did. You didn't follow the mighty prophet. I can't believe I did. I never
And a lot
knew.
of adults knew about this. Like there were adults everywhere, all over that knew that we hung out and everything.
But you were not the victim.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what we got going on, it sounds like at the Church of the Highlands is pretty much just what the Middle East would call prearranged marriage.
I'm not going to. I'm not going to say this church of. I'm not going to name this church's name.
I
Yeah.
will, because my next door neighbor is the video guy that covers the state with this thing. He's the one responsible for getting Hodges live stream at all the campuses around the state. It's a Church of the Highlands. If you get online, a lot of people call it a cult. You probably
Yes.
heard that before. But
Cult of the Highlands.
yeah, but prophet. I never knew that the Church of the Highlands had somebody they called a prophet. That's a new one to me.
Well, I've noticed a lot of people.
I don't think it's an actual like position in the church. I think they're just people who tell the pastor that they're prophets.
Okay. Go ahead, Catherine.
I noticed somebody a few months back saying something about there's now levels in the church like there are and like in the Baptist church now like there are in the Mormon church. Have you heard of that? Different levels of heaven?
No, I haven't, but I know that the pastor has his own version of the Bible now, and they make you take a class to become a member, and that includes showing your financial records every year.
Catherine and I do weddings, right?
Mm.
We get a lot of Church of the Highland couples because the Church of the Highlands will not marry a couple that's living together. They'll take their money for premarital counseling, and then after they've done that, they'll turn them down and say, well, we can't marry you. In fact, they'll tell them, and I get this from the couples, they tell me, they'll tell them that, well, if you want us to marry you, you've got to separate and not live together for at least 30 days before we'll marry you. So that's our experience on that end. It's like most of these couples have been living together for years,
There's a Reddit thread on this church with a lot of people with stories like mine and other things that have happened. There's a Discord for all of us, what we call survivors, to talk like this. There's a lot of us.
Could you share those links with Catherine?
Yeah, I can do that. I can do
Yeah.
that because I'm telling you, there's a lot of us. And some people have been approached by journalists and things. Like, there's a lot.
Would you turn them on to us?
I can drop information and see if anybody's interested. A lot of people are, some people aren't.
I'm not saying that they need to be interviewed like you are or anything. I'm just saying that, they're there for sharing. So, yeah. Anyway, Catherine, follow up on that on Discord if you're familiar with that, and Reddit.
Sorry, I had to check on the baby.
You're fine.
Okay, I will definitely do that.
Yeah, when you send those links, we're going to follow up on that. And you don't have to drop a link on anything. I mean, we just like, I want to hear stories. I don't have to use names. I just, this is a big thing. And all I want to do is let the world
A lot
know.
of these people want to share their story. There's some people who are only comfortable sharing with others who went through it. And then there's a lot of people who are tired of what is still like. There are people who are still currently leaving the church that are coming to the Reddit thread and coming to the Discord and telling new things.
Yeah. I'd like to be part of it. And I'm sure Catherine would too. Catherine, y'all go ahead and talk. I talk too much, so I'm going to back out.
Okay, continue on your story, Karen.
What?
Continue. I'm sorry, car alarm's going off outside. I said, continue on with your
Uh,
story if you don't mind.
so when I was in the office and they were asking me these questions, I had started crying. And the lady that pulled me in the office was like, "Hey, like, what's wrong?" And I was just kind of like, I feel like I did something, like, like there were like four adults talking to me and I didn't know what was going on. My parents didn't go to this church. Like, even at 17, almost 18, like it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, you don't know what's going on because you never encountered that before. But they kept assuring me, like, you didn't do anything wrong. We're trying to make sure you're okay, like this, that, and the other thing. And I didn't realize till after the fact it was wrong. And he called me and told me, like, hey, I was pulled aside by so and so, so and so, so and so, and so and so. And I was told, I can't see you anymore. You have to find another ride to church. We can't even talk when we're at church. Like, you ruined everything. And I'm just like, okay.
Wow.
And he was like, so we're not supposed to be friends. I'm not supposed to talk to my future wife, this, that, and the other thing. And they're like, well, you really shouldn't have been alone with a child. And that was the only thing that was ever said. It was toward the end. And then I was basically literally shunned. And I never went to that church again or any church for
Uh,
any length of time. I would go like here and there, but I don't go to church.
y- y- you're gonna have to shoot me that person's name in private, um, because I'll be honest with you, this is not the first story, even where your father and I worked, that we have heard. This is not the first time I've heard this story coming out of that church. And I really hate that.
Tell, take a moment now, and what would you tell parents and other teens to look out for in church, to be aware of in church? How would you warn people of all this? You're involved in the Reddit and the uh, whatnot, so you got the platform. You've had your experience. You've heard other people's experiences. What would you, at this point in time, share to the world that people should know coming out of Christendom?
Well, number one, your kids need to be taught that just because somebody's in a position of authority at church doesn't mean you got to just give them all the respect in the world, because that's where it starts. And you also don't have to do what someone tells you to do if it makes you feel uncomfortable or you feel like you may not need to do it. And people need to teach their children to question authority. But it starts with just somebody who's just a little bit older being friendly. And that's a very sketchy thing. There's no reason for somebody 20 plus to want to be with a literal teenager, to want to hang around that. Like, there are different points in their life. They don't have the same things going on. That's not normal. That's not something like an adult would want to do. Like, I'm in my 30s and I feel weird when my friends, teenage kids, are around me because I'm like, oh, I'm too old to be around these teenagers. Like, that's not a normal thing. If there's anyone at the church who's paying more interest to your child than they really should, that's a red flag too, because they'll try to get them alone and get them to convince you, oh no, so and so's a good person. Oh no, so and so would never hurt me. And then, when parents hear that kind of stuff from kids, they kind of feel reassured. But that's how it starts. It starts with these innocent little things. Like, I brought you some candy today. It can be as innocent as that. The same old man bringing candy to the same kid over and over and over to earn trust, to garner attention. It literally starts in the most innocent seeming ways with malicious intent, and you really have to pay attention to everything. And if you get even the smallest sketchy vibe, it is totally okay to stop something and to say no and to put your foot down as a parent or as a person. But I think a lot of parents don't give their children the right to say no to anything, and that ain't okay either.
Yeah. So with your experience and then the other experiences you've heard from other people, um, would you say that this has caused more people to leave the church? In other words, you said you
So
quit.
I don't have any hard data, but I've been talking with people over the past few years, and yes, increasing numbers. People all the way from teenagers to people in their 50s that I've talked to all have pretty much the same reasoning. Um, these types of issues are arising in all types of churches. Um, it's not just Baptist or Catholic or Church of God or anything. It's all the churches. It's everywhere because it's in people, and people are in churches. So it's just a big problem.
So you've got a little child in the room next to you there that you're raising.
hmm
Um, how has this affected your views as you raise your child as far as taking them to church or getting them involved in church?
I mean, if she wants to go, she can go, but I'm not finna let her do anything by herself. And if they have issue with that, then obviously she don't need to be there. Like my parents came to things with me sometimes and stayed the whole time. Like I'm not gonna keep her away from anything, but unless it's like my parents' church where they're involved in ministry and I trust them to keep her safe, I'm not going to let her go. And that's not just church, that's anywhere. I'm gonna homeschool her. She's not going to school. Like I don't trust nobody. I do not trust nobody. That is my entire world. I prayed for her. Literally, I was born like my purpose in life, what God made me to do was be a mama, and I'm not going to take it lightly. And I also want to teach her to have the skills to be smart enough to catch some of this stuff. I know sometimes we don't catch it all, and that's just human nature, but I don't want to raise her to be the sheep that falls prey to the wolf because she doesn't know better.
So you would not. What I'm hearing is you certainly wouldn't. It don't sound like uh, claim that church is a safe haven for kids.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Now a lot of these
Definitely
ca-
not teenagers.
yeah, a lot of these cases that I'm familiar with, and then you've had your connections hearing cases too. A lot of it happens by youth pastors and youth camp and that sort of thing, which creates a whole different environment. Even though it's church promoted stuff, it still creates a. But so clearly, you've got in you based, and your experience, as you know, ended before it got real bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it still had a dramatic effect on you. Just what happened to you. Can you imagine how that would affect somebody if it became a sexual act, if it became something further than what you went through? Because if this affected you to this level, just imagine what it does to somebody that actually went steps further than yours. So you're at a point in your life after those experiences to where you're standing up and saying, I need to warn people. Is that where you're at?
Yes.
And you say that in these public internet forums that there's others like you that's probably been dealt with went to a further level in their cases than you, and they're at the same point of finally. Are a lot of these people a lot older now, like you, than when these cases happened, and it took them this long to step forward?
Most of these people are in I'm going to be honest with you, most of these people are people I went to church with at that time, was in youth group and no, or were in
Oh,
that intern program. Like a lot of these
so
people are people that were hardcore Jesus, hardcore the church,
so they're
that
not
I
wearing
thought would never leave.
so they're not wearing the Jesus T-shirts anymore.
No.
Uh, and so these are Alabama folks. These are not folks from California and Tennessee. They're local folks you're connected with on these forums because these are international forums.
Yep. But these are local people. I mean, some of them have moved, but they all at one point were here attending that church. Like a lot of us even have heard the other person's name because it's a huge church. You don't know everybody. But a lot of us are like, oh, I've heard of you through so and so, or you used to do such and such ministry. You know, it's just one of those things, like 7 levels of connection or whatever.
So who is supporting this mega church now? Is it older people now? Is it middle-aged people? Is it, it you
I'm
don't
not
know?
100% sure. I know that people in the forums that very recently attended,
Mhm.
it's a fairly healthy mix of people that have been there for a while and like new people. So they're still roping new people in.
I had rented a truck yesterday because I had some stuff to take to the dump from my backyard, and I returned it to Enterprise this morning. And the guy that drove me home from Enterprise engaged me in a conversation. I carry one of my books around with me, and his parents go to the Church of the Highlands. He looked to be around your age. He quit church too. He didn't tell me of any cases or anything that happened to him, but it was a short ride from Enterprise to my house. It wasn't a very lengthy conversation, but I find, and in the weddings we do, we find a lot of people. The younger generation are just steering away from church for one reason or the other. They see hypocrisy. They see this. They look at church as a business instead of a God place, you know, and so it's not uncommon, even without this molestation crap going on, that a lot of people are leaving the churches. I know it's hard to see in Alabama because we're in the Bible Belt, but they say that in the United States that the fastest
They
growing.
lost a lot of people when they had all that controversy with their last pastor they had to kick out.
Oh yeah, yeah. Uh, I can go on to other things I know about Hodges and whatnot, but I don't want to
That
deviate from
was,
it.
from what I read in the forums, that was the breaking point for a lot of people who were barely hanging on with that place. Because there were rumors and people got wind of it weeks before it blew up. And the pastor of the church was all just like, no, it's cool, because if you can pray everybody into being a good person, apparently. So a lot of people had hurt feelings because of how it was handled, because it was brought up to church leadership like, hey, we're uncomfortable with him still being on staff here, and they didn't care.
Yeah.
So
Hodges,
it became a problem for a lot of people.
are you familiar with Hillsong Church out of Australia?
No,
They are
not really.
they have satellite churches in the United States. Hillsong got to be well known here because Justin Bieber went to Hillsong. Okay. Hodges was very close and still is with the Hillsong people in Australia. So Hillsong paid Hodges something like $25,000 and expenses to come to Australia and speak for an hour. That's pretty good money for an hour speech. But then the Church of the Highlands paid the pastor of Hillsong to come to Alabama and give them an hour sermon, and they gave him $30,000. Okay. The point is that the founder of Hillsong ended up having get fired from his own church because he covered up child molestation cases in his own church. So
A lot of people that are in the Ark that are in that same church that the Highlands is in are having the same thing, because I find all them articles. And I don't play, because I literally, like, I've been making posts and everything for the last year because I'm tired of this crap. They're like, my issue with church is that nobody church is right. The church traumatizes you more than the daggone world does.
Yeah. And it's plastic. These people
So I
are
just don't go.
plastic. They're plastic. The people that go there are putting on a show because they're not really who they're presenting themselves to be. Right? It's like, and I call it cultural Christianity. It's not about God, it's about the church.
Yes, and that's where Christianity's going wrong, is because it's not about God, it's not about Jesus, it's about how to protect the church and all the stuff that's going on in the church. It's got to go.
Yeah. Um, Catherine, I'm going to back out and let you girls take it from here. I've said my little piece. I really appreciate you coming forth. I hope you share those links with Catherine, and we'll
I
probably
will.
join. Yeah, we'll probably join, and we'll let people know who we are. If they want to talk to us, fine. If they don't want to talk to us, that's fine too. We're not pushy. My mission is, there's a scripture in Ephesians that says,
Hmm.
do not participate in their evil deeds, but expose them. And that's the scripture you'll find on my website. I run a website called www.boycottchurches.org. And it's like you can have your relationship with God without the church, and it looks like you're doing fine without the church. Did you turn evil?
I mean,
No,
I think I'm pretty. I mean, my husband thinks I'm mean, but he's my husband. He's
Well,
supposed to think I'm mean.
there you go.
I don't think. I
Now,
mean,
Catherine, I don't want to talk about Catherine. She needs God.
I don't think. I sit here and I look at myself as a person, and I beat myself up a lot, and I think I'm doing things bad, but and then I turn around and I look back and I see what I do for people and how I treat people, and I ask for them to treat me the same way, and it's like I feel like the church just how bad of a person I am, and it's always there.
Well, regardless of doctrines, regardless of creeds, regardless of all those different things, to me, the hypocrisy in dealing with this child, pedophile, molestation, grooming, and all that stuff has got to be exposed. And I appreciate everybody that comes forward, and I'm more than willing to provide a platform for anybody that wants to tell their story and share it and help others, because somebody has got to warn these people. I'm sorry. I'm not encouraging anybody to be a transgender. I'm not encouraging anybody to be a cross dresser, but they're not the problem. The
Nope.
problem, unfortunately, is coming from the church.
Hmm. I mean, I've been in the restroom with what you would call a transgender woman. I have been in the restroom with what you would call a transgender man, which a transgender man was born female but transitioned into a man, and a transgender woman is a person that was born with male genital that transitioned into a female. Okay, just in case no one knew that.
Yeah,
But
and,
I
and
have been
it's not supporting anything.
no.
First of all, if God gave us free will, who am I to take that free will away? Okay,
Yes.
that's number one.
And
Number two, nobody wakes up, and I learned this earlier in my adult life. Nobody wakes up one day and decides, I think I want to be gay. Who in Alabama in their right mind would wake up and choose to be gay? That'd be the worst thing. You know what I'm saying? So the point
and
is, again, is exposing them for their hypocrisy, and that is the whole key to it, and protecting the kids, because they're not talking about it. They don't want to talk about it at all. They don't mind talking about the Catholics and what happened to the priests, but in the Protestant churches, they don't want to talk about it. They're not discussing it. They're not doing anything about it. So that's where I am. Go ahead.
oops, I think we Kelsey backed out for a second there. Um, I I think the more that we talk about it and the more that we realize that this has gone on for a long time, and those of us that have been through this and know people that have been through this, we need to be talking about it because we've got children out there now still that need to be protected. We have no choice but to protect
Mhm.
these babies. I mean, they're innocent children.
When I first got to know Catherine, her and her husband and her daughter were still going to church over there somewhere around Westover. From what I understanding, because of this similar situations, none of them go to church now.
Pretty much, yep.
Huh?
Well, pretty much, yes. Well, we were actually going to a church in uh, Vincent, Alabama, and it was our first time at this church. And we walk in, and everybody's all arms around this preacher and praying for him and his children and stuff like this. Well, come to find out, the preacher had murdered his wife.
Oh, where I grew up, there was one of them things. We was like, there was a lot of police on our street one day, and I asked my parents what happened, and they're like, "Oh, the preacher down the street, he killed his wife," and I was like, "Okay."
Well, this guy had a girlfriend. I don't know all the details, but you know, I'm sitting here. The church is surrounding this murderer. There is a murderer right here inside this building who has one not he's supposed to be a man of God. He killed someone. He will not admit he killed someone. It has been proven that he killed one. I think he finally did admit that he killed someone. But I'm sitting here thinking, you people are all wrapping your arms around this man that murdered his wife. And then afterwards, after he was convicted and everything, then they're like, oh, well, we knew it all along. It's like, then why didn't you say something?
Because if he had been found not guilty, then it would have been false charges and God.
I just, you can't sit there and do something wrong and purposely hurt somebody and then look at them and say, please forgive me. I'm sorry. And that's where I started having a problem with church. And the next step is I can be a total pain in the fucking ass all my fucking life. And 5 seconds before I take my last breath, I can ask for forgiveness and go to heaven. Now,
I mean, yeah.
think about it. Think about it. I've lived a fucked up life. I've hurt people. I've killed people, blah, blah, blah. But 5 seconds before I take my last breath, I'm going to heaven. But if I've been a good person all my life and I've tried to do the best I could from the bottom of my heart, I'm still not good enough to go to heaven just because I didn't believe in your particular version of God.
I'm about to have to go. I think she's about to wake up.
All righty. I'm sorry, Dom. Well, I've had fun. It's been a good night.
She's
I've enjoyed it.
drooling.
Good to spend time with you this evening. Take care of your baby.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've
Thank,
enjoyed
thank
it.
you again for sharing
I
your story.
will.
Okay. Have a good
You're
night.
welcome.
Bye bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Okay.
All right. We're going to say good night, folks, and share
Good
this
night.
all you want. And we'll have more shows coming up. We'll try to do this every Thursday evening. We haven't set a time yet, but we'll keep you posted. Take care.
Most definitely. Have a good night. Bye.